Hello and welcome back once again to Organic Cardboard. My name is Owen Kneep, and today we are coming back to Fall of the Mountain King in order to go over the solo rules this time. Last time we visited Fall of the Mountain King, we were going over the full standard set of rules, but this time we're going to be talking about playing this just by yourself. And so you're not dealing with any of that competition of another clan throughout the game. And this version, what you're going to be doing is you're actually going to be competing with the gnomes. The gnomes are actually going to score points, and you're going to be trying to mitigate the damage that these gnomes are doing throughout the game, because you are actually not going to score any points until the very end of it. So throughout the game, you're going to have strongholds that you're having to hold a presence within in order to protect in order to keep those gnomes from scoring points in those areas. And those strongholds will be determined at the end of during the setup and after the first round. You'll be getting a few more, and so in all there'll be about 8 of them that you'll have to cover on the board. And during the game, then you're trying to keep up with that, and you also have the gnomes placing obstructions in your way on your ancestry board. So every time you're taking a turn, you're having to deal with areas that are going to be blocked from the gnomes, as well as a lot of extra movement around that gnome wheel. So you're going to see a lot more breaches happen as well. So there's going to be a lot of gnomes on the board. And you're going to just have to do what you can to protect this area. And the theme of this, from the flavor text on the rules, is that you are essentially just trying to protect those great halls just long enough for your troll clan in order to escape and survive the day and come back so that they can reclaim their glory at a future date. So hopefully you can get there with it. The rules are, again, a bit different. You're going to be dealing, again, with those obstructions. The clan board is going to be different, too. You're going to have to hit a threshold on each one of the clan boards in order to score points, and also in order to keep those gnomes from gaining bukus of points if you don't, because they get a lot of points if you don't do anything on the clan board. So again, you're basically just mitigating damage throughout the game, attempting to claim as many great halls as you can at the end, and try to claim as many of those clan votes as you can at the end, because your only points that you're scoring are going to be from the great halls and from the clan board. So it's much more of a defensive kind of version of the game. So anyways, let's quit talking about it. We'll go ahead and get to the overview of the board, and then we'll start talking about some of those differences, and I'll see you over there in just a moment. Okay, so here we have the play area set up for a solo game. We're going to use yellow as the player character, and then we're going to use pink to represent the gnomes in a sense. The gnomes obviously aren't trolls, but they do use these another colored troll as a what they'll refer to as an obstruction token. So anytime I'm referring to obstruction tokens during this video, I'm going to be referring to these little pink trolls that are going to, I don't know, maybe you could think of them as being paid off trolls that the gnomes are using, or some kind of trader trolls, or otherwise they're just a token that didn't require them to have to create all kinds of additional tokens there for the solo version of the game. So those are going to be obstruction tokens. Now these blue guys are just another color troll that the yellows are going to be using, and that's because in a normal game you're limited to 25. But in the solo version, you can have up to 50 of your own trolls out. So these blues are essentially the same thing as these yellows. They just create a larger supply for us. So I want to go over all of the differences on the setup, and then we'll get into the differences on the rules. So first thing is that you need to remove the champions from the champion decks that have this little symbol here that refers to that they're not able to be used during solo. So it's kind of like a little Roman numeral 1 with a line through it, and you're going to find 4 of those in the setup champions, as well as another 10 from the wave 1 and 2 champions. That's going to also include those 2 wild champions that are in the 1 and 2 decks, so those won't be available for you to use. Otherwise, we've got the champions set up here that are available for us to try to sway. And my Ancestry board is going to be set up a little bit differently. So one of the things that is different when you're setting up the Ancestry board is that normally you start from this base card that everybody gets to kind of build off of. When you're playing a solo game, you get a second one of those, but you have to place it over the first one in a way where you're covering at least 2 of the other squares. You could cover 3 if you wanted to, or whatever other combination, but you have to cover at least 2 of them. The way I had set up my board is I actually covered them over this way before I started using the cards from the Ancestry card draw pile. So that was my starting setup, and then I built off of that. Now, I'll go ahead and say first off, I did get this champion when I was setting up that allows me to have a larger Ancestry board built. So normally you're restricted to a 6x6 grid, and it's the same in solo as well. You're still restricted, but this guy's a little bit of a rule breaker. He's going to allow you to have a 7x7 grid for your Ancestry board, and he also allows you to draw after you do your normal drafting. You're going to get to draw an additional card from the Ancestry pile, and so he will actually start. He'll have one more card than everybody else on his Ancestry board. However, he doesn't get to choose on that very last one. He just has to draw a random one off the top, and he's still going to have to cover something. So I guess there's a little bit of give and take, but it's a very powerful starting champion for that reason. So my board has the 2 starting cards here, but it also has the 4 Ancestry cards that I chose. So yours is likely to look a little smaller as it would in a normal game, whether it's solo or multiplayer. The way that we choose these cards too is different, because we're sort of simulating a draft without actually doing the draft, where you're passing the cards around. And so instead of passing them around, since you're playing by yourself, you're going to draw 4 cards like normal. And from those 4 cards for your first selection on your Ancestry board, you'll place one of them down, and then those other 3 you're just going to discard. You're going to do that again, where you're going to draw 3 for the second choice, discard the other. You choose one from those 3, and then discard the other 2. And then for your last choice, you're going to draw 2, pick one, and discard the last one. So that's how the Ancestry board is set up a little differently. Now your player mat here, the supply track, has a side on the back that is made for solo play. So it gives you a little overview of the round structure on the bottom as well, and it may have a little bit of a different setup from the normal supply track. Yeah, so the desperation tokens are set up a little bit differently. You actually get a little, well, they're kind of similar, but there's possibly more of a chance to get desperation tokens depending on where you're at on the regular side. So otherwise, it's essentially the same thing though, with just the overview on the bottom. So because my Ancestry board started with a supply, we're on wave 1. My supplies can go up to 8 actually, and I do not get a desperation token on that setup. Now it can't ever go over 8 again, just like the normal game. You're always set to a maximum of 8 on your supply. Otherwise, let's go ahead and go over the whole board here and look at some of the differences. So again, you're playing against the gnomes, and it's a really weird setup from the multiplayer setup, because you are only scoring points at the very end of the game. You don't score any points during the first, or during at any point during the game until the very end. You're going to be mitigating points though that the gnomes are going to be scoring, so you're going to have to try to keep the gnomes from scoring points while setting yourself up to get those points at the very end. Your points that you score are going to come solely from controlling caverns around these great halls, having a higher number of controlled caverns around each of these great halls, as well as controlling the clan board, where you have to have a threshold number of votes in each one of these sections in order to score any points, and also to keep the gnomes from scoring points at the end of the game. So we do have a point tracker though for both of us, and really we're using pink as the gnomes tracker. You might as well put that on top, because ours is not going to move until the very end of the game. So as we look at the board here too, you can notice that all these great halls are still flipped face down. When you set up the game, you're going to put them all face down like you would start off normally during the beginning of the setup, but you do not reveal them all. You're going to choose 2 of them to reveal, and you get to do that before you place your layers out and your various other trolls. Looks like I'm missing a troll over here. And yeah, you'll get to see that information ahead of time before you choose where your layers are at, and you also get to, again, you get to be the one that chooses which great halls are revealed. So there's going to be a lot of hidden information on the board here. The same thing's going on the clan board here. Instead of all the little point tokens being revealed in the beginning, you're going to only have 2 revealed. And that's, again, going to happen before you select your champion, so it could make a difference possibly on what champion you choose, because you get those starting votes as well. So I got 2 in the moss section up there at the top. I just wanted that champion because he looked like he was pretty powerful during the setup. Now, at the end of each wave, during this refresh that's happening at the end of each wave, we're going to reveal 2 additional great halls, and we're going to do that 2 times. So we're going to do that at the end of wave 1 and of wave 2, and then so at the end there's still going to be 3 of these great halls that you won't even know what the points are. They're always going to be either 4, 8, or 12, but that's going to be unrevealed information. So we're dealing with a lot of kind of secrecy going on during the game that we're going to have to just kind of deal with. These though, you're not going to reveal 2, you're going to reveal 1 at the end of each wave during the refresh. So these are going to be even more secretive, so you're only going to know 4 of them at the end of the game, and the other 3 are just going to get revealed during scoring. So as we continue around here, I will go ahead and say that all of these gnomes are set up just like they would be normally. We're going to draw these out as you would during the normal setup in order to choose where these gnomes are starting at, as well as the swarm token. Now on the clan board, another odd thing you'll notice is that these obstruction tokens that we're using, the pink trolls that we're referring to as the obstruction tokens, are creating what they're going to call strongholds. And your strongholds you can kind of think of as like really important places for you to protect during the game. So maybe they're weak points the gnomes are going to be entering in from, or just really vital places to keep protected. So the way that you're going to select these strongholds is you are going to draw 4 cards out of the gate card draw pile here during setup, and at each one of those locations you're going to place one of those obstruction tokens on the matching domain on the clan board. Now what that's going to mean is that during the game, as we're playing, you are going to have, you're really going to want to have at least an equal number of caverns that you control, equal to the number of these obstruction tokens that are on each one of these domains. So like for moss, for example, at the very top, I really need to make sure that I have at least one cavern controlled. Later on, as we go, there could be multiples of these. There could be up to 2 in one spot, and if that were the case, I would need to have control over 2 caverns to keep anything bad from happening. But let's go back and say we just have the one. As long as I have control of that cavern at the end of the wave, we're going to go through what they call end of wave scoring, which is a little, might throw you off a bit because again you're not gaining any points. It's the gnomes that could gain points. If I were not to control any of the caverns in the moss domain, then the gnomes would score 3 points. And as a consolation prize, I would get a desperation token if that were the case. But as long as I have at least one cavern, I could have multiple caverns, but it's not going to give me anything extra to have multiple caverns beyond the number of obstruction tokens that are on the clan board. But as long as I have one, then I get to take a mini bolster action too. So I can choose one of those caverns in that location and bolster into it at the end of the wave scoring, and the gnomes won't score anything for that track. Otherwise, they're not scoring anything on these places that don't have any strongholds, that don't have any of these obstruction tokens on them. But you're going to want to make sure, again, that you have at least one cavern covered in each of those domains with the other trolls there. So at the end of wave 1, you are also going to have 4 additional strongholds show up. And you'll draw them off of this wave, or this gate card pile, just like you did in the beginning. So because there's 7 and you're drawing 4 additional ones out, there's going to be at least one of these sections that has 4 on them. So let's just say it landed like this. We'll just do the top. And we'll put one more on granite. So let's say this was end of wave 1. We're refreshing for the round, and we draw those additional stronghold obstruction tokens out. That's only going to happen at the end of wave 1, so we're never going to have any more than those 8 total out on the clan board. But now, again, at each of those sections, you're going to have to independently refer to each one of those tokens. So for the moss domain, let's say it's set up just like this for the moss domain, and I've got control over one cavern. Even though I have 2 trolls out, I've only got control over one cavern. I will get to do the bolster of 1 for one of those tokens. So I've got 1 success, but the other one's a failure because I don't have control over a second cavern. So in that instance, the gnomes are going to score 3 points over here, and I would get a desperation token if that were the case. If I didn't have any trolls over here, let's say I didn't have any of the caverns, now we're looking at the gnomes scoring 6 points just for that one section right there. And I would get a total of 2 desperation tokens to use for later. So a little bit of a consolation prize, but not really worth mitigating those 6 points that he just scored for free off of that clan board. We're going to go down each one of these too. So now I have to really keep control over a lot of spaces on the board, which can get a little difficult, but that's going to be kind of where you're aiming at, is protecting those zones, as well as getting yourself set up and ready for those great hauls at the end of the game. So let's move on. We have the gnome wheel here, and the gnome wheel is going to be pretty similar, but with some tweaks. Some of this stuff is going to be taken off of the gnome wheel as far as the way that it works. So the influence action and the bolster action are essentially going to happen the same as they normally would. So those you can refer to the original multiplayer rules for. The move trolls symbol though is slightly different. So whenever you take that, you do the same thing that you would do normally if we did a gnome action of one. You're going to get to move one troll out from a section that it was previously at. Let's say I had a gnome or a troll over here. I could move this troll over into this section though with another gnome. That's something that is different than what occurs in the multiplayer game. In the multiplayer game, you cannot move trolls out of a cavern into a space that initiates battle like that, but you can do it on the solo rules. So that's the biggest difference. It's just an easier way to clear out these gnomes. And I'll go ahead and say too that if you remember from the when you take a normal gnome action in the multiplayer game, you get to look at one of these and this happens before that effect on the gnome wheel. You get to look at one of these gnomes as well as one of the gate cards, anyone that you want. And the solo version though, you actually get to look at two gnomes. So you're going to have a lot of gnomes show up on the board on the solo version because that gnome wheel, the breach is going to get tripped quite a bit more often, and we'll see how that works here shortly. But you're going to get to look at two gnomes, and so when you do that, you can actually just leave them flipped over. You're the only one playing the game, so instead of peeking, we're just going to call that revealing. And then you would get to look at one wave location. And so if we took a gnome action, then we would get to look at that revealed information before this happened. So if this started over here in this gain honor section, and it landed over there with a power of 2, the way that I have it marked, then even though this is a power of 2, again, it doesn't change anything about the revealed information. It doesn't matter how strong the power is. You're only going to get to reveal the 2 gnomes and one of these gate cards. So that you might find that if these were switched, instead you had a power of 2, now you know that information. You know that information before you got to move your trolls out, and so if these trolls were sitting here, you could move them in, initiate battle, take those guys out. But you don't get the points, though. Remember, you don't get any points until the very end of the game, so you're really just trying to kind of area control throughout the game until the very end. The other thing that we'll talk about is the breach. So when the breach happens, this is a little different as well. So normally, anytime you do combat with a gnome on here, you will and you kill them, you'll move them over onto this gnome wheel. But you don't do that on the solo game. You just leave them where they're at. Or I mean, you just take them off the board, I guess, if you're killing them. But they are not going to increase the power of the breach. And also, if you normally in the multiplayer game, when you move trolls in and kill one of these gnomes, you're also going to move the this pawn up one for each of those gnomes that you've killed. You don't do that on the solo version. But instead, when you kill one, just take it off the board. And then again, if you do the breach later on, you're only going to ever have to have 2 gnomes show up. But the way that it works as far as where that breach is going to occur, you don't get to choose where that breach occurs at. And this is any time this happens. So whether it's your turn or you end up getting it pushed from the gnomes kind of taking on their kind of sort of turn. There's sort of a turn that the gnomes are doing. Anytime that happens, two gnomes are going to show up, and the way that you choose where that swarm location is going to change to is you're going to go into your pile of gnomes and pull one out. And then when you pull one out, it's going to have a number value on the bottom of it. And that number value then will determine how far clockwise that spawn location is going to move. So I drew a 2. You also throw it back into the mix so that that could be drawn later whenever the gnomes are actually going through their breach. And then we would move 2 spawn locations clockwise. And then they're going to show up on this moon gate right here. So then two gnomes would spawn in if that were to occur. So that's how the breaches are happening. They're just a little bit different. They're going to happen more often, but they're not going to be as strong as they could be. So the other thing is that this boost wire, this boost tripwire here, doesn't do anything on the solo version. You don't even affect this track at all, so don't even worry about this. But if you land on this section, the reason why we have an obstruction token sitting on the gain honor effect there is that instead of you gaining points, because again you're not gaining points until the end of the game, that allows you to remove obstructions from your ancestry board here. And now we'll go ahead and move into what obstructions are and how those occur. So we've already kind of talked about using obstruction tokens to create those strongholds, but the other thing that's going to happen is every time you take a turn, whenever you take a turn, you're going to, let's say we've done a double weak whatever advance action right here. Say we just spread a couple of these guys out. I don't know. There we go. And we'll just move this down. We'll move this down 1, just to remind ourselves that you have to remove that supply tracker down as well. After I've taken that action, I'm going to draw a card off the top of the Ancestry card stack. So from the symbols that show up, you're going to look for those 4 basic symbols, the ones that come on that starting card, the advance, the influence, the bolster, and the gnome action. And if any of those show up, you are going to have to cover one of those up on your ancestry board. So you'll take one of those obstruction tokens and just find any one, doesn't matter what power it is. So if I'm on wave 1, this is only going to happen once every time I take a turn. This is going to happen 1 time. I'm going to choose one of these symbols. I could choose either one because there's 2 of them on this card that I drew, and I could either do the advance or the influence, and I could cover it up. And so these obstructions are going to get in your way as you go. They're gonna keep you from doing those clusters where you're connecting things together. So let's say like if it was right here, I couldn't take like this strong advance action of 4 here by connecting all those because that guy's blocking in my way. I'd have to get around it somehow, which as it is, it would be a bad spot for me to put that. And I get to choose where this goes, so I would want to probably put it off on the side just to keep it out of the way. So that's only going to happen once on wave 1, but if it's wave 2, you actually have to choose that a second time, and you can't choose the same symbol. So if it was wave 2, I wouldn't be able to use this influence symbol here to cover that spot on my ancestry board. I'd have to instead choose an advance symbol and cover that. Oh, whoops! Let's give it the correct control here to show obstruction. And then that would be done for wave 2, except the other thing that we look at on this card is any of the other spaces, so including the just empty spaces. So it could be the empty space, a wild symbol, it could be a supply symbol, or one of these elder symbols. If any of those are showing up on that card afterwards, then we're going to move this pawn on the gnome wheel that number of times. So on this instance, it would move twice. So that kind of happens at the end. That doesn't like continue to happen like the same way that we do on like if it's wave 2, we have to select 2 of these symbols on the card to cover up with obstructions. We don't do this part twice. This is only going to happen once. So if it was wave 3, And we had already used those two symbols. So wave 3 means that you're going to do it 3 times. Wave 1, you only do the obstruction once for every turn. Wave 2, you're going to have to do 2 obstructions. Wave 3, you're going to have to do 3. But if you had already covered, you'd already done those 2, you can't do the same ones. There's not another one on the card to do, so you'd actually get away a little free on that. Wave 3, you wouldn't actually do that. But some of these cards, come with like 4 symbols on them, so they'll completely obstruct a lot of your board as you go. But one of the other things you can do too is, instead of choosing to actually cover the symbol that it's asking for, if on your Ancestry board, if you have Elder symbols, these Elder symbols in a normal game, they'll give you points at the end of the game. They do not on the solo version. But one of the things you can do with them is you can put your obstructions on those Elder symbols. Or if you had a wild symbol here, if this was actually part of the board, I could have covered a wild symbol instead of these 2 symbols. So I could have done that in place of one of these. I could have covered the Elder symbol. Now the reason why you choose the one over the other is the wild symbols are easier to get rid of the obstructions than the Elder symbols, because when you're refreshing at the end of the wave, you will remove all of these obstructions that are on here, so these actually get removed off. But the Elder symbol, any of the Elder symbol obstructions stay put. And the only way you're going to remove them then comes back to this gnome wheel, this last effect. So if you land on the gain honor symbol, which is instead a remove obstruction effect, you are going to get to remove that number, whatever power you took. If you took a gnome action of 2 here and got to move that up to with a power of 2, then, and it landed on that space, you're going to get to remove up to 2 obstructions off of your board. So you could remove those off of those Elder symbols at that point, but that's the only way that you can remove them from Elder symbols. So you got to be really careful about when you choose to actually use those. Only do it if you really need to. But that's the big difference with the gnome action and the gnome wheel. Otherwise, when you're looking at your actions here, the advance actions are going to act the same. The bolster actions are going to act the same. The influence actions are a little different, because when you do an influence action, these champions are going to be influenced the same way. Essentially, you're going to put a vote on with an additional one. As far as I can tell on the solo rules, it doesn't mention anything different, so we're otherwise using the multiplayer rules here. The first time you influence one of these champions, you'll get an additional one. So if I were to let's say we took a power 2 influence action here, I would get to put it on 3 because it's the first time he's being influenced. The gnomes are never going to influence these guys because it doesn't make sense for gnomes to influence their champions. But we're going to put that on that 3 space there, and each one of these champions, in order to gain them, they're going to have a threshold that you have to reach. The base threshold is 3, so you're always going to need at least 3 votes in order to gain them at the end of the wave scoring. But they're going to increase by 1 for every gnome that is in their domain. So as it is set up right here, the fire domain, which is where this guy's coming from, has an additional gnome in it. And so I would not get this champion if I ended with only 3 votes. I would need at least 4 in order to gain him at the end of the round. However, if I did only put 3 there, I required 4 to get him, so I wasn't going to get to actually have control of him at the end, I would I would get a free vote on the clan board. So I would get to place I would get 1 point in the fire domain on the clan board as kind of another consolation prize for not getting those, because it really stinks if you can't get those champions that really help you out throughout the game. And then it also would prevent additional new champions from showing up. So you definitely want to get these if you can, because they're going to allow you to still get those votes on the clan board that you really need as well.
Otherwise, you're still getting votes in the clan board from dominating locations and such. But you do want those champions if you can get them. Oh, and when you are going through these waves, one thing that I forgot to mention too is entrenchment. So your gnomes do not entrench on this game the same way that they do on a normal game. Um, if you ever have a single gnome by itself at the end there, they're not going to entrench. The only time that I can tell that these guys will entrench is if you go in to attack one, like you say you didn't know this was a 3 and you bump this guy into here, and then you do the normal action where he fails, he goes back to a layer. At that point, that gnome would then entrench and get another one there. But otherwise, you're not going to see a lot of entrenchment happen during the game. So yeah, so there's that. Otherwise, the rest of the game is going to play the same as it would normally. So we just play it out, use our champions' special powers that show up, and you're trying to just do a lot of area control, a lot of damage control throughout the game because you're trying to keep those gnomes from continuously scoring on you as you go. And you're also wanting those free little mini bolsters that happen as you control those stronghold areas. Now you can follow your supply track here, the little player aid on the bottom that shows what happens at the end of each wave. But you're going to continue to go through and just try your best to set yourself up in a way that you're going to be able to control as many of the caverns around each of these great halls as you can. Get as many, as many votes as you need to on the clan board up to the required amount. So one thing we did not go over is how this clan board works as far as scoring goes. So if you reach the threshold, and the threshold on the clan board is the smaller number, normally the person that's in third place gets this as their honor points at the end. That's how many points you need in order to be able to get any points at all for that. Well, in order to gain the most points and also keep the gnomes from gaining points. So if the threshold on this one for mud is 6, because the smallest number is 6, I need at least 6 votes here. I don't need any more than that. I just need at least 6. If I hit 6, then I get 8 points. If I don't hit 6, say I only had 5. If I only had 5 votes in mud, I would actually get those 5 points as honor points at the end of the game. But the gnomes get to score the high value, so the gnomes would be like an additional 7 on top of me getting 12. So that would really suck. I definitely want to make sure that I get enough votes in mud in order to be able to keep the gnomes from doing that. But as you're playing here again too, you really just need to efficiently hit all of these votes. So ice you really only need to get 1 vote in it. You still want to kind of post up, like we're seeing the way that it's just from the beginning set up here that we know one of the Great Halls is worth 12 points over here. We're going to get to how those are scored again too. But if you just want to keep control over a couple of these areas so that you can get that at the end. Otherwise, as far as votes go, you only really care about getting 1 because any more than that's not going to get you anything. And the most you're going to get is 3 points, but you will keep the gnomes from scoring 7. So again, a lot of this it's a lot of like defense that's going on throughout the solo version, as opposed to just really trying to just go through and attack and get a bunch of points that way. It's mostly about defending against the gnomes. Now, at the end of the game, again with these Great Halls, you get to score points as long as you have the most dominance around each of those Great Halls. So, and if you had equal dominance, I think we already said this, but if you had equal dominance at the end, where each of you if the gnomes have 1, you have 1, nobody scores any points. So you need to make sure that you are getting, well, It's not so bad on a 12 pointer if you're just keeping the gnomes from getting those. So you could make that kind of your strategy if you wanted to, just mitigate and keep the gnomes from getting those points and try to get your points elsewhere. So there's different ways of going about it. Oh, and one other very important thing about champions is that when you start hitting these wave 3 champions that start showing up to be influenced, if you gain them, you will not get this whatever special effect is on the bottom. You're still going to get the clan votes, as well as the main action that all of these are going to do is going to be the same. You're going to look at whatever domain they're in, and you're going to find a great hall that is adjacent to their domain. So like Granite here, either one of these great halls, and you'll select that great hall, and then you can completely remove all of the gnomes from one of the caverns that are encircling one of those great halls. So they help you to gain those dominance over great halls at the end of the game. So could be a nice way to break some of those high point values that the gnomes might get, or to be able to break that shared dominance over an area so that you get the points. But that is essentially all of the rules. What you're going to go for at the very end is, again, to make sure that you have more points than the gnomes in order to win. And if you don't have as many points as the gnomes, then you lose. So they've overrun your mountain, but they're going to overrun it regardless. Basically what you're trying to do is bide enough time in order to get the clans out of the mountain in order to be able to survive, to live another day, and to come back and reclaim what's theirs. And I guess in the Hall of the Mountain King as we continue with the sequential order of the game. Now there is a way that you can change the difficulty. So if you find that this game's like too difficult, that gives you a little chart on the back of ways that you can set this up and play this out so that you are not going to require as much in order to make it a little easier. They say that the base standard setup from the rules is a 7. What they give it a 7 points of difficulty. So you can judge that how you want and kind of fluctuate it if you need if you want to increase the difficulty too. It also has rules to do that. But at this point, I think you know everything that you need to in order to play the game as a solo game, as long as you watch those original rules.
Okay, so that was Fall of the Mountain King, the solo version. I know those rules are a little tricky compared to the original standard version of the game, but I hope that the video made sense. I hope that this helped you to not have to pore over that rule book to understand some of those differences, and I hope this gives you a great opportunity in order to play the game whenever you need to, or whenever you want to. Needs and wants, those can get mixed up easily. But I hope that this allows you to feel confident playing the game by yourself if you don't have anybody else to play with. I've found that it's an excellent game at solo just as well as it is at 2 players and 4 players. I've really enjoyed it at those levels. Now, Board Game Geek actually says that the best level is 3 players, so I haven't tried that out yet, so I've got something to look forward to. But again, really liked it at all the other player counts, and definitely including solo as well. It's certainly it's a different game at solo. It certainly is, but it still has most of the same elements in it, and it's a great time. But anyways, I hope that you found the video helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy this video, a couple free clicks can really help support channels like mine in the future. I'm going to be continuing with content just like this, as well as review videos and unboxing videos. So keep an eye out, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much.